Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. After a brief hiatus during the summer, we are back, and it really is basically the start of almost weekly shows as we return. We are a week ahead of training camp, but we're not doing the training camp preview. This is episode 230, and we're going to kind of wrap up the offseason with Madden, with a supplemental draft pick, and then this is our yearly division ranking show. I'm your host, Jess Root from cardswire.com, the NFL wire site from the USA Today Sports Media Group, and my co-host is, as always, Seth Cox from revengeofthebirds.com, SB Nation's NFL site. Seth, it's been a while. We've been busy. You have a new house and all moved in, so Are you actually ready for football to start? Because football is just around the corner, and as long as we've been waiting, I feel like I'm almost not ready now.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just been a lot of different things going on where you're busy and you're trying to cover this team, but it hasn't been as open this offseason. We were just actually kind of talking about that with what we'll talk about to begin with. And it's been, a little more reined in, a little tighter lipped. I think some of that has to do with what we talked about last episode with Cliff Kingsbury's, secret offense that they're installing. And the biggest hype has obviously been Kyler Murray. And he continues to fill the pages of writing outlets, but it doesn't seem like we're less than a week from when this post that the Cardinals will be convening in Glendale for training camp.
Yes, absolutely. I can't wait for it to happen. We've got actually a little bit of news here because the Cardinals did make a change on their roster. It has gone ultimately unannounced. But we're going to talk about the supplemental draft. They used a pick in the supplemental draft to add a player. We're going to talk about the release of the Madden player ratings and how it has everyone upset. And then we're going to go through and rank them. So we're going to talk about the best players in the division at each position, and then the teams collectively at each position, as we've done the last several years. So let's go ahead and get started about this. Let's talk about the supplemental pick. So the last time they did this, we were very, very young. In 2 consecutive years, back in 1989, that's the most recognizable one. They used a first-round supplemental pick on Tim Rosenbach, quarterback, who had a promising first year starting in 1990 and then injuries. Then they used a 9th-round selection on William Williams the next year. You've never heard of him for good reason. He never did anything. But now, 2019, they used a 5th-round pick in the supplemental draft. So they forfeit their fifth-round pick next year on another safety, Jalen Thompson, out of Washington State, a guy who was going to head into the season as one of the really is one of the best defenders on that Washington State team, and because of a supplement that he took, he was found there was a banned substance. He lost his last year of eligibility, which allowed him to enter the supplemental draft. The Cardinals, very little fanfare was given, and he had a pro day. The Cardinals were one of a whole bunch of teams there, were one of the few that showed some interest in talking to him, and lo and behold, they make the selection. Seth, what do you know about this kid, Jalen Thompson, as he now is added to the roster? They had an extra roster spot, so it was almost as if they anticipated this.
Yeah, it was not the most surprising thing. We talked about it on my website quite a bit, Revenge of the Birds, and the fact that Thompson kind of fits the Vance Joseph mold of defensive back in that he is a guy with versatility. He's a guy that can play in the slot. He can line up at safety, something that Joseph likes in his DBs. When you watch him play, then you kind of see a guy with the ability to keep the ball in front of him and make plays, but also that he's not going to be a guy that locks things down. He's not going to be this all-pro type of corner. But I've called him, and I don't mean this in a negative way. I've called him kind of like a poor man's Tyrann Mathieu. Like he's going to be the Tyrann Mathieu of like 2017. Was that the last season he was with the Cardinals?
Yeah.
Where, it's like, oh man, you remember 2015 All-Pro Tyrann Mathieu? Like that. He's not going to be that guy, but he'll be he gets beat every once in a while, but he makes he makes some of those instinctual plays that not many guys can make. It's just he's a really he's a nice player. He's a nice fit in what Vance Joseph likes to do defensively. It was at such a little cost. I guess this completes the Josh Rosen trade, right? Like,
I don't think so technically. I think they give up their own fifth-round pick. Is it their own? Okay. I would assume that they're using their own fifth-round pick, and then so they still get the Rosen pick next year, the fifth rounder. So they had an extra fifth-round pick to burn, which, hey, use a day 3 pick before the draft. I'm okay with that.
Well, and not only that, but this is something we talked about. You could end up with 2 guys that get playing time in Jalen Thompson and then other fifth-round pick Deontay Thompson, and when you're talking about a secondary that, I wrote about this after they picked Thompson. If you look back at that 2015 secondary, it's a who's who of just talent. Gerard Powers and who was the other corner that they had opposite Patrick, and then obviously Patrick Peterson, but then they had Rashad Johnson, Tony Jefferson, Tyrann Mathieu, DJ Swearinger, all on the roster. Like this was just a boatload of talented defensive backs. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, they have 3 lockdown corners or they have Earl Thomas roving the back. It was like they have 6 guys that are legitimate starters in the NFL in the secondary, and I think they're trying to get more and more back to that, as opposed to what they were going towards, which is like more defined roles, commonality roles, and things of that nature previously.
And so Thompson, the way he projects, he's in terms of how he looks, he's a 5'10", 186. So initially, I felt almost kind of a surprise if you're looking at the safety, because he's roughly the size of Tyrann. He's a little taller, but he weighs right about the same as Tyrann does. And if you look at when they drafted Budda Baker, it felt like he was supposed to be the bigger, stronger, more athletic version of Tyrann. Though Tyrann had some other special traits. He's not Thompson's testing numbers aren't great, but they're not bad. So there's no real athletic flaw other than maybe strength. But I over the last several years, as we see Steve Keim drafting guys that are uber athletic, it's almost like they're moving a slightly different direction. Thompson, obviously, what you're going to see with a 5th round type prospect, because he would have been a day 3 prospect this year in the April draft. There's always something. There wasn't, from what I see physically, there's nothing glaring other than his frame.
Yeah, and you kind of, you look at what he did at Washington State. Obviously, there was not a lot of negative things to say about him from like Mike Leach and the players, which is good to see. I mean, a guy got popped for taking something. I was talking to somebody about this, and so this is obviously just kind of talking, but it's like you kind of brought it up right now. He's a slight guy. He's an undersized guy. He's a small guy. Those are three of the descriptors when you talk about him, and he gets popped, probably going to take some stuff to help him bulk up, to help him get a little bigger, to hopefully he can make make a waves in his senior season and maybe get into that day 2 range as opposed to being a day 3 pick. So
and the way Mike Leach described it is one of his roommates or one of his friends who does lift, worked at like a supplement place and had this supplement that he picked up, and it just happened to have a banned substance in it. It was the way he describes it wasn't egregious, but I mean, he had mixed feelings about the penalty, especially because he says as a team, they try to be really careful about making sure that they're taking supplements that are all monitored by the staff, and he did something outside of that. So whether it was malicious or just a mistake, that's the reality of it. But it wasn't. This wasn't so that aside from that mistake, there are no other off the field or emotional or behavioral red flags like we've seen with, let's say Robert Kimdichie, who's we both raved about, we both loved the pick. I was super excited about it, and then literally every single red flag that you could come across has come back to bite the Cardinals in the butt.
Yeah, so I mean that's the thing is, like you said, it's an unfortunate one. It's not one you want. It's not how you want to start with a guy like him, but it is in the same sentence. It's something that happens all the time.
What's going to be interesting now is how this shapes the roster, because at safety, his addition, assuming that obviously a 5th round pick is no lock for the roster, but drafting him in July makes you think that they really like his potential to be on the roster. So he's probably going to have to be pretty awful to not make the team. But it really kind of changes the outlook at safety, because you kind of felt you knew what that room was going to look like, because you've got DJ and Buddha, they're the starters. You have one veteran in the room in Josh Shaw that knows the Vance Joseph defense. He's coached him before. And then you had Deontay Thompson, their pick this year, their 5th. So basically they've used 2 5th round picks this year on young safeties. Then you've got Rudy Ford, who's be there for special teams with an outside chance of a guy like Tyler Sigler making the roster, but it looked pretty set. Now, the addition of Thompson, the second Thompson, you now say, okay, so who's going to get left off the roster? Is Rudy going to get bumped? A guy who in terms of defensive play has disappointed, but does a lot of things on special teams, super athletic. Or Shaw, you'd hate to see him off the roster because, well, he's the only proven guy. He's the only guy with any experience behind their starters, which you sort of need. And he also is familiar with the defense. He's versatile, can play safety, corner, slot, even though they basically worked him on. So would you happen to say that it's more likely than not that we've seen the last of Rudy Ford with the addition of Thompson, especially since you have to assume he'll probably be able to play special teams as well?
I mean, that's the hard part is you look at this and is it Ford that goes? Probably. I mean, it feels like it, right? Like it feels like Ford's the one that's going to go here. So you just expect this to be the end of like Ford, which basically will end the 16 draft, right? Because there's no way Kimdichie is coming back, and then Brandon Williams and Robert Kimdichie will be the only guys left on the roster, and Williams
is definitely not even a lock for the roster, and honestly, Kimdichie's going to start the year either on PUP or injured reserve, and so his contribution this year is going to be minimal at best.
So yeah, I mean, this is a tough one, and so we'll see what it looks like. But yeah, I mean, this is probably the end for either a Rudy Ford or a Brandon Williams.
And with that, I mean, there's not much else to say because the team hasn't talked about him. They haven't announced anything. We probably will get our first comments about Thompson once training camp rolls around, assuming that they get him under contract, which it shouldn't be too hard to do. He's a 5th round pick. You throw him what is probably about $100,000 in a bonus, and he makes the minimum. So we'll know in about a week. I would assume they're going to talk about him then. So with that, coming up on the Rise Up See Red podcast, we're going to talk about what apparently all the players are talking about, and I don't think there might be 2, maybe 4 players who are actually happy with it. We're going to talk Madden. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. And guess what? Madden ratings came out. We saw the rookie ratings, but now the full ratings are out. And through some adjustments that they've done, I think pretty much everyone is angry, which means everyone is talking about it and everyone's going to go buy the game and they're going to hate playing it, but they're going to play it anyway. Only 4 pure 499s in the entire league. That's 3 defensive players. You've got Aaron Donald, you got Khalil Mack, you've got Bobby Wagner, and then you've got, interestingly enough, receiver DeAndre Hopkins. The Cardinals have 1 player in the 90s in Patrick Peterson, 9 players in the 80s, and overall they are one of the lowest rated teams. The total team rating is a 78. I just saw it on Twitter, which puts them tied first, third to last. Only below them are the Giants at 77, the Dolphins at 74, and then the Bills and Jets and Bucks are all at 78 with them. Obviously, it's just a video game, and it really doesn't matter. But what are you hearing about the reaction to these ratings?
It's crazy how upset people get like this. It's interesting. I think, the whole situation is just, it's for fun, but I kind of wrote about it tonight in like the kind of open thread that we have. And I talked a little bit about how, when you played, and I don't know how long ago it was that you played. I mean, for me, it's been years. But when you played, you typically didn't make yourself bad, right? And so in the same way, when you talk about that, you talk about this is, these are guys that have probably played Madden for a long time. And now they are, seeing themselves as being the bad players. And so I'm sure it makes them feel like this is, they're getting slighted in what they had hoped would be their chance, at this type of thing, to be involved in the game and really enjoy this. And then you come out and you get ranked, poorly, and that kind of sucks. And nobody wants to be ranked low or feel slighted. It's interesting to watch guys like Tyrann Mathieu. Though I don't know, have you seen Matthew's tweets at all about this?
Oh, Matthew, if there's one thing I don't miss, it's the fact that he gets mad about everything.
Well, no, but the interesting thing was more about that he is advocating for other players. And so, he's talking a little
Deshaun Watson,
Chris Harris, Desmond King, the guys that he felt like were kind of stiffed on those. So those are the ones that are more interesting to me, is how these guys feel about stuff and about other teams, because we know guys like Matthew tend to be a little, what's the word we're looking for? They tend to
be sensitive to it.
Yeah, sensitive. That's the word I was looking for. They tend to be a little sensitive. And they tend to, not do a great job of dealing with the scrutiny, and they, like you said, they tend to disagree with everybody that says anything negative about them.
What the interesting is to me is the number of players that feel slighted. If everyone's being slighted, are they really being slighted? Because basically everyone's rating is lower than it's been before, with the obviously they put the 499s. In terms of the Cardinals, I wrote a piece about it. It published on Tuesday morning about the 8 interesting facts about it, and I look at it just in terms of what outside perspective is, or outside opinions are, about the talent on the Cardinals roster. Let's be honest, the talent was not good last year. How many 90s players can the Cardinals possibly expect coming off the season they had? Patrick Peterson is the 4th highest rated cornerback at a 92 in the entire league. You could quibble with a little bit the players that are rated ahead of him: Richard Sherman, Stephon Gilmore, and Jalen Ramsey. I mean, I'd quibble with Richard Sherman at this point in his career, but other than that, he's rated in terms of ranking at the position right at what you'd expect. For me, really the only odd rating was Chandler Jones, and maybe that is more of the physical traits, and maybe he outperforms his physical traits. Oh, because he came in at an 82, one of the most prolific pass rushers in the league. Got incredible length. He's incredible strength. He's not slow, and he actually came in below Terrell Suggs. Suggs, future Hall of Famer, but in year 17, is he a better player than Chandler Jones overall? I don't think so. So of everyone on the roster, the only one that really felt undervalued to me was Chandler Jones.
Yeah, and I mean Jones. I mean, everybody gets a little offended by Fitz, but to see Fitz still in the 80s in his 80s, that's impressive. And you watch these guys, and there's definitely talent on this roster, but I think a lot of it too is there's just a lot of questions on this roster. So when you look at it from that perspective, as opposed to getting offended that your favorite player is rated poorly, it's cool to see these guys still getting being a little bit looked at in that vein of there's still some talent, but we want to see it. I mean, is David Johnson really that bad? No, but I mean, when was the last time he played well? And yeah, so that's kind of where they're at right now, unfortunately. So
the one that surprised me in terms of how highly it was rated, Marcus Gilbert, 84, 12 points higher in rating than any other offensive lineman on the Cardinals roster.
But I mean, again, he's kind of like Fitz. Like, they have a history of just being talented players. Obviously, Fitz doesn't get hurt like Gilbert has the last couple seasons. So that's what where the question comes in over maybe a Fitz.
Yeah. But for me, I didn't think, but I was surprised at how, considering the reputation of the Cardinals offensive line, how actually highly he was rated. And I know that I know that Todd Haley at one point said he was the most talented right tackle there is in football. Obviously durability has been an issue, but a team that trades a player away who needs offensive line help, and they go to a team that has offensive line problems, and the offensive line is still seen as a big question, to see one of the offensive linemen on there. I kind of liked seeing the ratings of him and Charles Clay at an 80. I know 80 is not great. I still consider 80 good. That you still look that the reputation that Clay has is that he's going to be an upgrade at the position than what they had a year ago, which is kind of fun, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's kind of the hope of it, right? Is that he turns out to be as talented as everybody's assuming he is. And more than that, he stays healthy, and they're able to really get something out of him for a full year, and maybe be ready with Corey Cunningham in year 2, or who's the kid they get? Joshua Miles, was that the kid they just drafted?
Yes, with his 56 rating.
Yeah. So I mean, that or even, I mean, maybe even better or worse. I don't know your opinion on this, but like maybe they are able to, look at this or re-sign Gilbert to like a 2-year, $20 million type deal. That would be something that would be um, really nice if they could get 3 years out of Marcus Gilbert at a high rate of talent, as opposed to what they've kind of dealt with for so long.
Then, as well, what we can also look at this is that we can tell that based on video game rankings, the Cardinals made the right decision with their quarterback, because Kyler Murray is more highly rated than Josh Rosen.
Here's the thing I'll say, and I was never ever anti Murray or anti Rosen. I was never anti Murray either, but I was never one of those people that's like, oh, you got to do this, or you got to do this, but not a single person that I trust thinks that the Cardinals made the wrong decision in that in that swap. So that to me says kind of everything.
All right, coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, we're going to focus on what basically the big part of the show is supposed to be about, and that's ranking the NFC West. We're going to look at different positions. We're going to start up the quarterback. So that's coming up next on the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, the Rise Up See Red podcast. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, and it is now time to start the work of ranking. It is the time of year. July is the month of lists and rankings, and for me, this is a chance that I take to, because being so Cardinal centric in everything I do with the NFL, and the same for you, is I know what's going on around the league, but I don't do much analysis personally until I do these rankings, and I kind of dive deep into the roster and look at who they've got and what they've done and what they could do in the years to come. And so this actually is an exercise of preparing me for the NFC West and what they have. I've completed all of my positional rankings. I did it 2 different ways. With the exception of quarterback, but I looked at who are the best players, X number of players, 4, 5, 6 players in the division at each position. And then ranked each team in the division on Cards Wire by the different position groups. And so we're going to start with the quarterback position, and we can talk about, in fact, let's talk about, let's rank the starters, rank the backups, and then the collective quarterback situation, which one you'd like the best. I don't think there's any argument who number 1 is in the starting quarterbacks in the league. You might make a small argument, but really, can anyone make the argument that Russell Wilson is anything under the best quarterback in the division?
No, I mean, he's the best. He's probably a top 5 player or quarterback in the NFL. I mean, he's definitely a top 10 player in the NFL at his position. So when you look at it from, that perspective, you're talking about one of, the truly unique and elite players that this game has had the fortune of seeing. And so from that perspective, he's got to be your top guy.
Right. And let's be honest, as good as Jared Goff's been the last couple of years, Russell Wilson is on a Hall of Fame arc. The way his career has gone. He has some, now granted the passing yards were down last year because they had such a good rushing offense, but if you look at all of his passing stats and advanced metrics, he is in the top 5 of almost every category except for like the volume of yards. He has done more with more and more with less, and it doesn't seem to matter. The Seahawks are always competitive, and he's always making plays, and honestly, he just doesn't have bad games. So not only does he play at an extremely high level, he has such a high floor that he's incredibly consistent. It's rare to see a quarterback with so little variance in his play. You take a Cam Newton, for example. Cam Newton's had some eye-popping games, but he's also had some stinkers. You might look at Russell Wilson's playoff performance, the 4-interception game against the Packers, but what did he still go out and do? I mean, they still ended up winning that game. And so obviously he's number 1, and I think obviously number 2 is Jared Goff. I mean, the top 2 are obvious. Here's where I think, and maybe it's the homer in me, when you go Kyler Murray and Jimmy Garoppolo, and I will admit that on all my other rankings, I kind of ignored the rookies. But since Kyler's a starting quarterback, I think that Kyler Murray will be a better quarterback this year than Jimmy Garoppolo, and that a little better. I'm not completely sold on Garoppolo. I know he's playing in that Kyle Shanahan, that is offense, who made Nick Mullins look great, but he has injury concerns. He's not been super durable. Yes, he's won games, but honestly, his passing numbers are not eye-popping in terms of offensive production. Would you like? Am I crazy? Am I being just too homers to put Kyler above Garoppolo at this point?
I mean, I always struggle with rookies in general, but Kyler, like I said, the people I talk to, the people I trust, people talk about Kyler in a different way than I've heard them talk about really any quarterback the Cardinals have ever had, which is like tough to like say, because this is not a organization that you typically talk positively about their quarterback situation and what they do. So I think you always give the nod to the more experienced player, but if you're asking me 1-to-1, who would I take? And I don't think this is being homer. I think this is just kind of being realistic. I would rather have Kyler Murray because I truly think he has a greater upside at a lower cost than what Jimmy Garoppolo has.
That's fair. Now, the backup, this is where it gets interesting because there's only one team in this division where you would feel comfortable with your team starting in the backup. And believe it or not, that's Blake Bortles. And we have declared our Blake Bortles love for years. But he really is. He's in a great situation. And the truth is, he has been a legitimate starter and has had very productive seasons. And now as a backup on a team where if he had to play, you know what?
Yeah, you don't feel the same way. Well, and so let's just break it down. If in whenever they play their first game, because I don't remember off the top of my head, but when the Rams and the Cardinals play the first game, if it's Brett Hundley and Blake Bortles, you're taking the Rams. And if it's Blake Bortles and Kyler Murray, you're not necessarily just going, oh, that's a win for the Cardinals.
No.
So, whereas if it's Jared Goff and Brett Hundley, All right. Well, they got that one. So, so and that's not a shot at Brett. Like, it's really not. But just in terms of, like you said, you're talking about a guy that's been to a Pro Bowl, that's thrown 35 touchdowns, versus a guy who has more interceptions than touchdowns in his career. So, I mean, that's just where it's at right now.
It is, and so for me, the Rams overall have the best. Even though Russell Wilson is likely a future Hall of Famer at this point, I still take the Rams quarterback situation because Jared Goff is a very good quarterback, and they have someone who they could win with, especially with that talent. We saw what Blake Bortles did with good talent around him and in Jacksonville. And if he were the starter for the Rams with Sean McVay, I have no doubt that Rams team would still be very, very good.
Right, and that's the key. Whereas you feel, what the 49ers are. I mean, Nick Mullins is not a guy that you roll over for, but they're a 5-6 win team. When you look at the Cardinals, they are literally building their franchise around Kyler Murray. That's not to say that Brett Hunt is, to stop that. He's not on the same tier. And the Seahawks, they are Russell Wilson. I mean, it's just who they are, type of thing. It's fine. There's nothing to look at from that perspective. It's obvious. They are Russell Wilson.
So, if we take the Rams at the top, if you had to pick the next best backup, would you go Hundley? Would you go the slash combo of Paxton Lynch or Geno Smith? Or would you go with the slash Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard next?
I probably would take Seattle, just because I think Geno has been slightly better than Brett in their respective careers.
What if it's Paxton?
Then that's tough. I think at that point you have to go probably Mullins than Hundley. That's my problem right now. Is you look at it, I like Hundley, but he's proven the least out of all the backups, unless Lynch is the backup. Wouldn't you say?
You're right. In terms of the way I ranked the teams, I actually put I think I would rate Hundley over. Now, Smith is interesting, Geno Smith, because he's got so much experience in the league. He's been okay and he's been terrible. But in terms of fit, I also like the Hundley Kingsbury fit as well, which I took into consideration. So I think I had him above the Paxton Geno. If it's Paxton, I definitely put Hundley above. I question more if it's Geno, and I still put the Mullins or Beathard at the bottom, because we saw extensive from both teams and from both players, and the 49ers were still pretty much a mess.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the thing, is they may be competent backups, but when you look at it, you're saying how many, you're looking at it from the Drew Stanton perspective, like, hey, I can stay afloat for 3 to 4 games with this guy. You're not looking at it as, hey, this is a guy I can move forward with. And so that's where I think you're, kind of accurate in that statement.
So at running back now, let's look at the running back situation. Talking about individual players, I actually ranked 9, and then we'll talk about the actual group. Looking at the position individually, I think there's no doubt that Todd Gurley is number 1. I put David Johnson number 2 ahead of Chris Carson, despite the lack of production for the last 2 years. David Johnson still had 940 yards in a terrible fit last year compared to Chris Carson's more than 1,100 yards. And Johnson can do more than. So I went Gurley, Johnson, Chris Carson. And then what I find interesting is the running back room for the 49ers, because they have no proven number one, but they have three really good number twos.
Well, and I think the other thing is you kind of hit it. You really have no idea what they're going to do right now.
But I did put Breida next at number 4 because when he was on the field last year, he was amazing.
Well, and that's kind of the hard part for them, and discerning who they are as a team. And so, I think Gurley's 1. I would agree David Johnson's 2 still. I think 19 will decide, because I also think that you're going to see more of Rashad Penny next year. Rashad, right? Yeah, Rashad. Yeah. Rashad Penny. So I think you're going to see a little more Rashad next year. So Carson at 3 makes sense, and then who is 1? Is it Breida? Is it they just signed Tevin Coleman?
Tevin Coleman, and they got Jerick McKinnon coming back. There, when I went top 9 running backs in the division,
they probably have 3.
They were 4, 5, and 6.
Right, and that's so when you look at it from that perspective, their running back room is clearly the best, but it's because they don't have a true 1, but they have 3 2s, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so, but that said, where I ranked the 49ers overall was I still put number 1, the Rams at number 1, because they still have the best running back in Todd Gurley, and I do believe in the prospects of Darrell Henderson.
Oh yeah, I love that pick. That sucks for the Cardinals, but I love that pick.
But number 2, I actually put San Francisco number 2. Now, granted, they don't have, like, between their trio of backs, none of them have been
the guy.
Had never been the guy. Tevin Coleman was last year, but they had a terrible rushing offense in Atlanta. So you're still looking at 800 rushing, but if you want to look at, especially when you have 3 complementary players in an offense that's really kind of flexible, that's a really good situation for running the ball. So they could get 600 yards to 700 yards out of 3 different players, depending on how they share the carries between Breida and Coleman and McKinnon. And all of them are very versatile. They can do multiple things. Breida and McKinnon both, and actually all of them are dangerous in the running game and passing game. I put the Cardinals ahead of the Seahawks in terms of their 1-2, mainly because I still have Johnson over Carson as the main edge. Obviously, Rashad Penny is a higher rated running back prospect than Chase Edmonds. But the way they've talked about Chase Edmonds the last year plus has me excited about what he could do especially in this type of offense, if given more than just 3 touches a game.
See, and I look at this, and I would say right now, I would go. It's tough. I think the Seahawks have the best room, because I think their top 2 can both be clear 1s. I would say the Rams are 2 because, like you said, they have the best singular back at this point. Although David Johnson could reclaim the title this year in this offense, and then I would go Cardinals and then 49ers, and that's the hard part, is because I think when you have three guys that you don't know, you have guys that could all potentially get 1,000 total yards, but I know what David Johnson can do. I know what Todd Gurley can do. I know what Chris Carson can do, and I then like the upside of Penny and Henderson more, and I just think that Edmonds could give you similar numbers to like a Breida, if given the same amount of touches. So that's why I would say, even though, like you said, they're probably, if you look at them from an individual perspective, they're probably 4, 5, and 6. I still like them the least.
Coming next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, we're going to continue and talk about the next set. We're going to talk about the pass catchers, the receivers, and the tight ends. It's coming on next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's look at the receiving position. Who is your number one receiver in the division now?
Oh, that's so tough, because I don't. Does it feel like this division has a clear-cut wide receiver one?
I think they do. I think it's Brandon Cooks.
See, and I like Cooks. I mean, you're probably right. From a talent perspective, he's probably the best receiver in the division. But
the interesting part for me is what happens at number 2.
I would say it's probably Robert Woods now.
And I still have Fitz over Woods, even though Woods he was really good last year and really consistent. But I looked at it this way. If you're building a team, would you rather, or in a big game, would you rather have a Fitz or would you rather have a Woods? Even at this point in this career, I still think, because of what Fitz can still do, I still put him just barely ahead of Woods.
Yeah, and I can see that, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that at all. I look at it from the perspective of, I think Woods has, kind of taken that next step. But again, I think they're both like kind of high-end 2s when you look at Woods and Cooks. So it's, nothing negative about them, but I just think they're both, kind of more kind of number 2 type guys. I think Fitz would be my 3rd, and then probably Tyler Lockett. But and you remember from the draft, I'm a huge Tyler Lockett fan.
They're counting on him too. They need him to be a number 1 guy.
Yeah,
at least until DK Metcalf develops, if he develops, they're counting on Lockett to be
their guy. Yeah, and so that's the tough part when you look at this wide receiver game, is there's a lot of guys that you're like, hey, I like him as my 2, and then you're like, oh crap, now he's my 1. I don't know how I feel about this.
I have Marquise Goodwin next, just over Cooper Kupp.
If Kupp wasn't coming off the injury, I think you probably flop that. But I would honestly probably put Dante Pettis and then Christian Kirk both above Goodwin and Kupp for right now, though.
Interesting. I had Pettis out. I did the top 7, and I had Pettis out of there. Though Pettis has a potential. I had Kirk as my 7, so I went Cooks, Fitz, Woods, Lockett, Goodwin, Kupp, and then ending with Kirk. Although Pettis, as I've gone through and kind of looked through some 49ers stuff, it's very interesting to see. I think overall,
I think it's mirror. There's kind of a mirror in terms of expectations and excitement between Pettis and Kirk. Like in both camps, like both camps are extremely excited about their second year prospects for these guys.
I think it's going to be obvious if we're looking at the different rooms. If the Rams having 3 of the top 5 or 3 of the top 6 receivers in the division clearly have the best receiver room in the division.
Even with the youth, I would think, and I'm me, I don't tend to lean towards the Cardinals in this stuff. I would think the Cardinals have the second best receiver group right now.
I agree, because they still have Fitz, and if you're looking at numbers, they had 2 of the top 7 for me, and the Seahawks and the 49ers have big questions at receiver.
Right. If you look at it and I kind of wrote about it for tomorrow, or for when this posts on Wednesday, I kind of wrote about it. Pro Football Focus did their wide receiver tiers, and they talked about Christian Kirk was the upside, tier 6 upside, and then Larry Fitzgerald was tier 6A, no upside. And I said the reason you get that is because if Fitz goes out and does 80 catches for 900 yards and 5 touchdowns, that's just a normal year. I mean, in fact, that's probably a down year for Fitz. If Christian Kirk goes out and has 70 catches for 950 yards and 6 touchdowns, well, he's on the precipice of becoming a breakout, right? And so that's the type of thing. You're talking about two guys that you'll probably see between 17 and 100 and 2,000 yards receiving on over 160 catches, when you say right around 160 catches. So
Yeah.
I think that is going to be better than any other, the next closest duo. And then when you factor in like an Andy Isabella or Chad Williams or whoever, Kevin White.
You're funny saying Chad Williams is going to be on the Cardinals.
When you take, when you factor in whoever that third guy is, you're probably going to get 200 yards from their top 3 guys. Are you going to get 2,100 yards from the top of the 49ers or the Seahawks? Like, you don't know yet. And I think, to me, that is why it's okay to rank these, the Cardinals at 2.
Tight end is, aside from the top, is completely unimpressive.
Well, tight end outside of the top in the NFL is kind of a wasteland, though.
Right. George Kittle, he is arguably the best tight end in football. You could say Travis Kelce, you could probably throw Zach Ertz in there, but George Kittle, he is far and away the very best. He's the very best tight end by a gazillion miles over everyone else in the division. After that,
not
it's
even
very
close.
It's odd. And for a position that has so little production from the Cardinals historically, I actually believe that they have the next 2 best tight ends on their roster in Charles Clay and Ricky Seals-Jones. When I was looking at the tight ends, shocked. Outside of George Kittle, you'd be shocked to find out that in the NFC West, Ricky Seals-Jones led the division, again, beyond Kittle, because he was inhuman. He was tops in receptions and receiving yards at tight end, and he was viewed mostly by Cardinals fans as a disappointment because he was supposed to be much, much better. And that surprised me because it felt like he was bad, yet he was better than all the other guys in the division. The Rams, who have 2 guys that they like. I mean, Gerald Everett was a second-round pick. He's never kind of done much yet. Tyler Higbee. And then, I mean, the Seahawks, after having Jimmy Graham, have gotten a bunch of nothing from their tight ends. Well, because they had a great duo in Graham and Luke Wilson. Now they've got a bunch of nothing. And so I actually have Charles Clay as the number 2. I'm going to say that last year, I say this, I have a lot of optimism for what Clay can do, even though I look at the numbers that he had from 2013 to 2017, which were great. And then I remember just how much production Jermaine Gresham had before he came to the Cardinals and then did a bunch of
and then withered up and died. But I mean, when you look at it, I mean, truthfully, if you just talk pure like usage, and I know, and just because he's not going to get talked about on here, if I don't do this, I think the second best kind of tight end is probably Kyle Juszczyk, right?
Yes, that's cheating as a fullback, but he's used like a tight end.
But that's what I'm saying is, like, you're right. It's a wasteland of talent. There's really, I mean, there's so little. So yeah, I mean, I honestly don't even know like the depth chart of the Seahawks tight ends anymore. Like I know who they are, but like I can't name them.
Nick Vannett, Ed Dixon, and Ed Dixon is a very nice football player to have.
But he's old.
That he is. And Nick Vannett, baby Gronk, has puts baby stats.
Right, exactly. And so you kind of look at it, I mean, is second in this division really worth
No.
bragging about? No. But is it good? Yeah, I mean, it's not bad.
All right, coming up next on the Rise FC Red podcast, we're going to talk about the trenches, talk offensive line, defensive line, the interior. That is, we're coming back on that's coming up next on the Rise FC Red podcast. We're back on the Rise FC Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Offensive line is tough to talk individually, so let's just rank the units, the groups. However, it's interesting to note, while I think it probably was quite clear who the best offensive line is, every single line has concerns. Everyone. It's kind of interesting to see that. Now, if my guess, who do you think has the top line in the division?
I would still say it's the Rams,
Yeah.
but I would say that what the Seahawks have done is actually kind of impressive.
Yeah, Mike Upati, right?
Well, just to see how they've completely overhauled in the last 2 seasons. That, I mean, it's what Cardinals fans have basically begged Steve Keim to do, right?
So yeah, so obviously the Rams are still number one, but they have 2 big question marks because they lost Roger Saffold at left guard and they lost John Sullivan and said they'll let him go, and so they're counting on a couple of second-year players. They still have a very good left tackle in Andrew Whitworth. Rob Havenstein is very solid at right tackle, and Austin Blythe was solid at right guard. But now they have 2 very big question marks. But because they have good tackle play and consistent right guard play, they can weather that storm, especially when you look at the questions on the rest of the division. I ranked the 49ers next. They have 2. Well, Joe Staley. Now, I wrote an article because when you look at there was a ranking of the top 11 tackles in the NFL. 3 of them are in the NFC West, and then there's DJ Humphries. Andrew Whitworth, Joe Staley, and Dwayne Brown all made the top 11 tackles.
And they're all, aren't they all over 30 as well?
Yes, they're all experienced. They're all over 30, and so the NFC West has 3 of the best tackles in football and DJ Humphries.
Yeah, I mean,
they've got Staley. McGlinchey has not been what they hoped he'd be. Laken Tomlinson at left guard, they like a lot. Weston Richburg, his play fell off after his injury, and then they project to have Mike Person. I put the 49ers over the Seahawks because, well, they still have concerns with. I mean, Jermaine Ifedi has been a disaster at right tackle, and they brought in Mike Upati. We know how that's going to end for them. So because I like the 49ers tackle situation and tackle and guard situation overall a little better than Seahawks. They're pretty even, but I had the 49ers just ahead of Seattle.
Yeah, and I think those 2 are kind of a toss up for the second, whereas obviously the Cardinals fall to the last, unfortunately. I will say this: I am mediocrely hopeful that the scheme of the Arizona Cardinals will change the overall outcome of their offensive line play. I'm not expecting miracles, but I'm hoping to see growth, unexpected growth based on that.
Looking at the defensive line, we'll talk about the defensive interior specifically. This is where I rank the players. Obviously, this is easy. Number 1 is Aaron Donald. Who do you think is the second best interior defender in the NFC West? To me, there's really only 3 players overall that are very good defensive tackles. And then after that, it's just okay. Who do you think number 2?
Where are you ranking, or where are we playing DeForest Buckner?
Interior.
Okay, so he would be 2 for me.
And he is 2 for me.
Okay, all right. So that's I mean, Buckner is probably the best interior defensive player in every division outside of the NFC West. I mean, that's just how, freaky Aaron Donald is. So that's, I mean, poor guy, can't get any recognition because he has to play behind Aaron Donald, or just, play in the same division as Aaron Donald. So
who surprised me is Jerron Reed has been so much better than and he's my number 3. He kind of burst onto the scene this last year, double-digit sacks. He was supposed to be just a
run stuffer,
and he turned into something much more.
Yeah, and that's that's kind of the danger of that Alabama defense that I always talk about, is that they're so well coached and they do their job so well that sometimes you lose sight of how good the players actually are, because so in the same way that it hides some players, it hinders other players.
Who would you rank ahead at next after the obviously the cream of the crop in the division? Now, here's the thing: Robert Nkemdiche should be in this list. He's not, so yes. So we'll lament that because he is gifted enough to be in that top 3. He's just not. So that aside, who do you think's the next best interiors after Donald, and Buckner and Reed?
I think it's probably Corey Peters, although I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised by Darius Philon and what he does. But I would say it's probably one of the Cardinals' 2 guys. They are the equivalent of kind of that 49ers running back situation where you definitely are, you like them, but you wish you had kind of the top guy or like a go-to guy to pair with them.
Yes, I actually put Michael Brockers. I know his play has declined some.
Yeah,
but I still have him ahead of Philon and Corey Peters. That's what rounded out my top 6.
Well, and that's where I get confused because they lift him as a defensive end, but I guess he's probably playing like that Calais Campbell defensive end.
In a 3-4, I still consider, because they play a 3-4, I still consider all of that interior.
Okay. Then I would agree with that. I would agree with that then.
And then if you had to, now this is where it gets tricky because of scheme. If we're talking defensive lines now, yes, we've got the Rams and the Cardinals run 3-4, so they've got basically 3 interior defenders. You've got the Seahawks and the 49ers, which run 4-3. Therefore, they will have edge players as well in their defensive line. If you're just looking defensive line, so that includes edge for the 2 teams, who do you put at number 1? Do you still, even though that they have no true edge, do you put the Rams at the top?
I mean, that's the hard part because you look at it and you're not exactly going to jump out of your seat with their talent, but you'd still take their starting defensive line over anybody else's because of Aaron Donald, right?
For me, the Aaron Donald effect makes it, because Michael Brockers is good, and so I say they're still number 1. But San Francisco's not far behind if you include that edge.
And if Nick Bosa is who you and I expected him to be, if the Cardinals picked him, they could close that gap because, again, Buckner, I don't know what his Madden rating was, but if Aaron Donald is a 99, Buckner's like a 92 or 93. Like he's a fringe all-pro player,
right? And then you add on top of that, I mean, Eric Armstead's fine, but they also add D Ford. I don't know how he's gonna translate to
that 43.
But still, if he ends up being a sub
See, he kind of reminds me of Chandler Jones. Like they're just guys that know how to rush the passer.
And so that 49ers front is
it's gotten better on
yes.
paper, obviously.
And then after that, obviously, because you've got the 4-3-3-4 set, I still have obviously the Cardinals I put at the back because they have three serviceable to decent, like very nice players, but replaceable with Darius Philo and Corey Peters, Rodney Gunter. While with the Seahawks, you got a top tackle in Jerron Reed. You add a very I'm going to expect Ziggy Ansah to be good again, and then after that, it doesn't really matter who you put. I'd still put with Ansah and Reed. I still rank whoever is the rest on that line ahead of the Cardinals.
Yeah, and so I mean that's the tough thing for the Cardinals right now is that they had so many holes coming into the season that they weren't able to really do a ton to address all of them, and so you're still a little wanting. I mean, Jones and Suggs are going to give you a good pass rush. You're probably going to get 20 to 25 combined sacks between the two of them, but yeah, I mean, they still need some help.
All right, so coming up next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, we're going to talk about the linebackers. So we're talking about the edge and the linebackers off the ball. That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, and now let's look at the edge guys, the pass rushers. So these are the outside linebackers for the Rams and the Cardinals, and the defensive ends for the Seahawks and 49ers. I am going to purposely exclude, like in my rankings, I purposely excluded Nick Bosa and LJ Collier. They are intriguing, and because, we've seen edge players fall apart coming out of college.
Well, and we've seen them take a year or two to kind of get acquainted to the NFL game. I mean, Aaron Donald. No, wait. I'm sorry. Hold on.
Come on, this is the one where the Cardinals are at the top.
Right. I mean, I think you have to. I mean,
Chandler
Jones is probably the best edge guy in the division still, and I think the 49ers pickup of Ford, though, like I said, I think they're very similar players. I give the nod to Jones because I think he's going back to the 3-4, and so that's going to help him. And we still have kind of the unknown of what D Ford will be
exactly
in the 4-3.
Was not impressive, was not great till a year ago. And that in that contract year, you always wonder, wait, is he going to be a high variance player? My number 2, and I know this is, I have D Ford at number 3, just behind Ziggy Ansah, because Ansah, I know the injury, but when he's on the field, he is so consistently disruptive.
Well, and I think it's an easier projection if he's on the field.
Yeah.
Because what we know about the Seahawks defense is that they're going to get after you. They're going to generate pressure and they're going to make you uncomfortable. So in that sense, I think you have an argument. I like Ford. I think he's just a natural pass rusher. But 2-3, I mean, you're really flipping a coin because after Jones, there's question marks about every single person after Jones.
And I've got Suggs after, the Cardinals now have, for me, they have the best mix of edge players because they have the number 1, and I've got Terrell Suggs, even though he's old, he's still productive. So I have him at number 4, followed by Clay Matthews, who's also old, and then Dante Fowler. And so you like the edge you kind of like the edge situation for you like the Rams. Fowler is more like Matthews is solid. There's more questions there, but you have questions with Seattle. the Cardinals have especially coming off a year where Chandler Jones was really it in terms of production. I still think Suggs is still at near the top. I mean, he's obvious. I think he's obviously a step behind D Ford and Ziggy Ansah, but I think I put him ahead of Clay Matthews. I put him ahead of Dante Fowler and Rasheem Green and then the other guys that are, whether it's Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa, whoever that is after that.
Well, and I think you're right, and that's the difficult part that you get into with these kind of rankings is because you have guys like Bosa and Collier that you definitely like. If you're picking a team, you're probably, because you have Chandler Jones, you're probably picking a Bosa or a Collier over Suggs. But if you're needing a guaranteed 7 to 10 sacks, you're taking Suggs, right? Like that's that's always the bugaboo with these type of rankings, is that you start to have to like flesh out a little bit of what each of them are, and I this is an interesting year because you've got the Rams who have Clay Matthews, but where are they going to play him? Is he going to be an edge rusher, or are they really going to ask him to play in the middle? Like you said, they have Dante Fowler who got traded. He was the third overall pick.
He was definitely a bust in Jacksonville.
So now and he had some flashes, but I wouldn't say he was special. Would you?
No, definitely not. But that there is definitely a drop off after that. What about the off the ball guys? If we're gonna rank the off the ball linebackers, obviously number one is very clear.
But I think the off the ball linebackers are similar to the is similar to the interior defensive linemen. It's Seattle, and then you can start to discuss everybody else, right?
Right. But you might be surprised. Like obviously number one, Bobby Wagner, but number two, after the season that he had, Corey Littleton is someone who I really liked, and he produced it. Like he filled the stat sheet, and I actually put him just ahead of KJ Wright, who is at this point in decline. His numbers, I mean, if he weren't playing next to Bobby Wagner, probably a lot of his production is in part because he plays next to Bobby Wagner. But KJ Wright's volume numbers are just out of this world for years. But what Littleton was able to do across the board in terms of filling this, the tackles, the sacks, and the interceptions, I put him as my number two off the ball linebacker in the division after Bobby Wagner, followed by KJ Wright.
I still have Wright over him, but Littleton's been really good. I think there are obviously the questions on the two big free agent signings for the Cardinals and the 49ers, and I think you would put those guys probably at 4 and 5, right?
Yes, I go Hicks. I did put Hicks ahead of Alexander, even though Alexander he's had a higher end production. That ACL injury plus what Hicks can do in coverage is, I put him just ahead, but also if you're talking this year, coming off the ACL, he's not going to be the same player after that.
And I think that it's a coin flip. It's that,
yeah.
What are you looking for this year? I think Hicks is which is crazy to say with his injury history, is probably the safer bet this year. The question is long term, and the nice thing for both teams is they really don't have much invested in terms of long term. In either of these guys, if for some reason they don't pan out, there are some pretty swift escape clauses for both teams.
If you're looking at the linebacker rankings overall, Obviously, I think with KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner, it doesn't really matter. And they've got a trio of guys who could get playing time at that third linebacker spot between Michael Kendrick, Shaquem Griffin, and Barkevius Mingo. But it doesn't matter who plays there. When you've got KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner, you've got the best linebacking core, even in a 4-3. I put the Cardinals at number 2 because of the edge presence. So I rank the Cardinals ahead of the Rams because you get the added bonus of having the edge guys with Chandler Jones, Terrell Suggs over the Rams linebackers. So Corey Little, Micah Kaiser, Clay Matthews, and Dante Fowler. They are close, but the edge presence on the Cardinals I put ahead, and then obviously the 49ers. They've got Quan Alexander, who's a proven guy. Fred Warner is an up and comer that people think could break out this year, but their third position is kind of a toss up.
Yeah, and I think those rankings are probably fair, especially when you add in the edge type of players.
And coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to talk about the defensive backs and special teams. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast. Cornerbacks. So, who is the number 1 corner in the division?
Are we allowed to say Patrick Peterson?
I say Patrick Peterson. I don't care about the suspension. He is still the best corner in the division, in my opinion, because while he doesn't get this, you could say, I think Aqib Talib is on the decline, and Marcus Peters is a little too volatile for me.
So here's a crazy thing, and I can't remember where I was reading this, but so who was the NFL.com guy? Brandon Flowers, right? That did his like top 10 corners and had Peterson 3, but had Talib at 1. And then I just saw today, was it Madden that has Richard Sherman?
Yes, Sherman's ahead.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. But anyways, what I was going to say about that is and I say this all the time. When you go look at cornerback rankings since Patrick Peterson's come into the league, I don't think you've ever seen Patrick Peterson ranked 1. Honestly, I don't.
Not in anything media.
But I don't think you've ever not seen him ranked top 5. Where everybody else in the last 8 years has fluctuated. And so to me, that's what makes Peterson 1 is that you kind of just hit on it like, oh, is it Talib? Is it Peters? Is it Sherman? Oh, well, if Sherman's, this is fine, then he's this. If Talib can do this, or if Peters can, kind of keep this under, well, no, like Patrick Peterson is consistent and always kind of even keel in his play. So maybe he's never had the same high-end season as a Talib or as a Peters or as a Sherman, but his lows have never been as bad either. So I would say he's 1.
Who do you put at number 2?
Probably Talib. That's tough though. Honestly, the Rams guys are 2 and 3 for me.
I put, for me, the Talib with the injuries and the decline, I actually went Peters, Sherman, then Talib. There's not much separation for me. I've been impressed as well with Sherman's consistency, even as he entered the league without the same athleticism that Peterson has, and he's managed to be a great playmaker. And you look at the amount that he is still avoided. Now, he does give up, like you will see him give up a play or two here, but he is still very consistently good overall. And Talib, he might be the scariest cornerback to go against because he's one tough mofo. And
he's a guy that he has some high variance, but when he's on, how many are better in the league? He's a much different, number 1 corner than Patrick in terms of physicality and style of play.
And my number 5 is Shaquille Griffin. He's got some potential still. They like him in Seattle, but he was ordinary-ish a year ago. He was too inconsistent, but I still like him. The wild card for me in this division this year, in terms of the cornerback room, will be Jason Verrett.
That's what I was going to say. Verrett, he's so good when he's healthy, but he's on the field less than you and I. So,
and so if we're looking at the teams, if we're looking at the cornerback rooms, who do you put? I think it's obvious. Obviously, the Rams are number one, but who do you put number two?
Well, I think the biggest reason why the Rams are one is also because they have Nickel Roby, who is just phenomenal.
Except for he's forever going to go down for that.
I know. Doesn't that suck? You're a great player, and your history is going to be the call that didn't happen. And that's tough because Ahkello Witherspoon in San Fran is not bad, and if he and if Verrett's healthy, then I think you give it. Because with Jimmy Ward, I think you would give it to San Francisco. But then with the Cardinals, so if we're saying all guys are available, I think it's the Cardinals. But man, that's tough.
Yes, I like Alford, Peterson, Alford, Murphy. I would have just a smidge above Sherman, Verrett, well, especially since Verrett's that's the wild card and all.
Right. If Verrett's healthy, they may well have the best corner group. Because Ward is very talented slot guy. So if Verrett is healthy, and then Ahkello Witherspoon is your number 4, like that's really, really tough to beat. But Verrett, again, that's like counting on Robert Kimdiche to not be a bonehead. Like I'm not trying to be a jerk. That's just the reality of it. Like
true. Which leaves Seattle at the end, and the fact that they went out and signed Jamar Taylor tells you that while granted Shaquille Griffin, he has great potential. Trey Flowers was solid. But when you're looking at Jamar Taylor playing for you after he got cut from the worst team in the NFL.
Yeah, that's a tough sell. They're definitely taking a chance with their corners, but they believe in their scheme so damn much. And it's hard to blame them.
Now, safety. We look at safety. Who is your top safety in the division?
Well, Earl Thomas doesn't play here anymore, so it's not Earl Thomas for once.
And here's the thing: Eric Weddle's now in the division. I don't have him at number 1 because while he's great, he's the greatest safety that has played in this division right now that's in the group. His decline in production last year was notable. And so I don't have him at the top. The guy I actually put at the top is his new teammate, John Johnson, who a guy I completely disregarded last year in the rankings because as a rookie. I didn't think much of it. I thought, well, I think I might have ranked the Rams last year as having the worst safety group in the division. Johnson went out and had a hell of a year. And just kind of across the board statistically, I put him as the top safety in the division, followed by Weddle.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you look at the Rams from their up the middle defense, you talked about it. Donald, obviously he's all world, but then you have Littleton, who you're saying like the second best linebacker, off-ball linebacker in the division, and then the 2 best safeties. I mean, and then you combine that, they have the best corner duo. They are just strong defensively, and then you scheme that Wade Phillips. I think Johnson is so severely underrated by other people outside of LA. It's not funny. Weddle, I think, is a good pick. I would say, I mean, Jaquiski Tart has been good, but I would take DJ over him, wouldn't you? But
I do have DJ at number 3 because he's never been a Pro Bowler, but he consistently putting up Pro Bowl type years without getting Pro Bowl.
And the hard part with DJ is you never know how long you can trust him for.
True. My number 4 is Bradley McDougald at Seattle. They love him there. They love him.
And he's really coming into his own. I mean, that's the thing, is it's going to be his defense now.
And my number 5 is Buddha. Even though we do enter, Buddha's going to be playing a role he's not played before. He's been playing in the box. He's played in the slot. And now he's going to play free safety. That said, the Cardinals talk about him like a budding star. And we've seen the production that especially when he's been healthy, he was banged up towards the end of last year. He is in on almost every play.
I think he's close to becoming a star, and that's kind of the maybe frustrating part of it, is that you're waiting for him to bust out and become the guy that we're all expecting him to be, while maybe missing the fact that he's just been a really good NFL player. And so that's always the hard part that's tough to, kind of to gather, that is that a guy that's a solid player in the NFL, a fringe Pro Bowl type player, but we're waiting to see that All Pro breakout season, because he was so good as a rookie that we expected just a huge amount of growth, and then he was just misused or mismanaged or both, and all the above type thing. So you look at it, I hope you're right. But this is going to be a big year for him, because I don't think that you can't convince me that he's not a guy that you re-sign. But could this be the year that we say, okay, he is a very good player in this league? He's not a great player, and I'm not ready to say that, but that's where I think we're at this year. But the other thing is this: this is his third year in the league. It's his third defense, and the third different position he's been asked to play.
You're right, and everything he's been asked to do
is different,
and he's been good.
Right, and that's what the hard part to reconcile is like, he has been good. He's been consistently talented, but when you put expectations on a player, sometimes you overset the expectations, and then you're like, what? Why isn't he reaching what I expect him to be? It's like, no, he's still a really damn good football player. Like, let's just enjoy that portion of it, and not lament the fact that he's maybe not an All-Pro.
Obviously, the Rams, since they have the two best safeties, have the best safety group. I put the Cardinals next at number 2 because,
I would agree with that 100%.
Unfortunately, for San Francisco, they have talent, but they have their safety position is they kind of have 5 guys battling for 2 spots right now. Jaquiski Tart and Jimmy Ward are both very talented players. They both missed half the season last year, and they probably start, but there's Tavarius Moore and Adrian Colbert and DJ Reed that are all kind of in that mix who could start as well. And so because of the uncertainty, it's not because of the talent, they fall at the back, while Seattle, they've got a good pair. Like, safety is a position of strength in this division. There's a lot of safeties to like on every team, because Tedrick Thompson, Bradley McDougald, both of them play their roles really well in Seattle. They like them both. And then the fact that San Francisco has 5 guys that they like, the problem is because none is really standing out, that is what gives you the most gives you the most pause to question.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I would say the Cardinals' solidness at 2 outweighs the potential of San Francisco or Seattle at 3 and 4.
Now, special teams, as we will wrap this up, I have the Cardinal special teams unit still the worst in the division. Every team has a good punter. Now, the 49ers have a rookie punter, but they love what he can do because he apparently can do a whole bunch with the ball as a punter. Andy Lee's great. The problem is they have the least proven kicker in Zane Gonzalez, a guy that, as much as we both like him being a Sun Devil, we don't understand why they have not brought someone in to give him real competition. They are betting on Zane Gonzalez, essentially, and I worry about that.
Yeah, and you look at, what the Seahawks have with Michael Dixon, who's probably the best punter in the NFL, and then
Johnny Hecker is still
Johnny Hecker is, yeah. I mean, Johnny Hecker is maybe like the 3rd best punter in the NFL. So I mean, like you said, you have 1 and you have 1 and 2, and Andy Lee being 3 is not a slight at all because this division is just so freaking good.
Well, kicker, they're super consistent too because you got Greg Zuerlein in with the Rams. He's still really good. Robbie Gould is incredible.
And they finally came to agreement with him. So,
and Jason Myers, for Seattle, they've been burning through kickers the last few years. But Jason Myers is a guy that only missed 3 field goals all last year for the Jets. And even though you don't know if he's going to be consistent, but you have to believe in him more than you believe in Zane Gonzalez at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair assessment, and it's unfortunate because it's what we've been kind of talking about. Like, you don't dislike Zane Gonzalez, but why is he the only guy here? Type thing, and that's another conversation for another day.
It is, and the return situation on pretty much all teams is pretty solid. I think the Cardinals have the most unknown. I mean, the Rams need to find a new kick returner, though JoJo Natson was pretty amazing as a punt returner. That's why they let Pharoh Cooper go. Dante Pettis is scary. I don't know what's going to be the case in Seattle because Tyler Lockett probably doesn't, but you've got Rashad Penny. I think at punt they're going to be looking at JD McKissick. And with the Cardinals, who knows? Like TJ, it depends who makes the roster. It's going to be TJ Logan, it's going to be Pharoh Cooper, it's going to be Demir Bird, is it going to be another guy?
It can't be Kirk except for like circumstances, right?
Right.
Like they can't trot Kirk out there.
I don't think so, but who knows? Who knows? And with that will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. So we've after about a month hiatus, we now give you lots of content as we wrap up, and we're close to an hour and a half. We will be back in a week to preview training camp, the position battles, all that good stuff. So listen to us then. Training camp will be in full force once for our next show. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. We'll be back. Thanks for listening as always, and go Cardinals.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.
Roll!